conflict in Gaza may have diminished the Shia paramilitary group Hezbollah, but a new report out suggests that Iran's other ally in the region, the Houthis in Yemen, are still very much in control, and says that they are committing what they call egregious human rights abuses. Edmund Fitton-Brown is a former UK ambassador to Yemen, now a senior advisor to the Counter-Extremism Project.
The report is looking at the security and intelligence service of the Houthis in Yemen. It has been very much involved in a number of troubling activities in Yemen, including aid diversion and also radicalization of minors at school, and also in oppression of political opponents, and also liaison with terrorists and assassination plots against opponents of the de facto regime who are not present in their territory. Whilst people knew that the Houthis were very brutal and doing a lot of bad things, including recruiting and fighting with child soldiers, this report speaks more than I think has ever been spoken before about a key secret organ of their regime.
And if we can just address two of those points in particular and how they might be addressed or rectified. Firstly, on diverting humanitarian aid, there are a lot of people in Yemen who, of course, need that aid. Is it at all clear what aid organisations or Western governments that might want to support them could do to stop that being diverted away from those who need it?
Yes, I mean, it's a matter of putting more pressure on the Houthis and insisting on more transparency from them. As you say, Yemen has been suffering an acute humanitarian crisis now for certainly most of the past decade, and it was always a poor country. It always needed a good deal of international assistance. The problem is that the Houthis saw this as a cash cow, something that they could use, and they set up a systematic method of diverting humanitarian aid. So in other words, they would control where it was received, and they would also avoid any kind of due diligence about who was receiving it.
And in terms of the radicalisation of children, that seemed an especially troubling part of this report. How on earth do we go about stopping that, de-radicalising children, while ever the Houthis are in control of these parts where these children are?
I mean, it's extremely difficult. You know, one of the first things they did when they took over large swathes of the country was to concentrate on controlling the education system and what was being taught in schools. And one of the things that they insist on people, you know, sort of saying as of rote is their famous scream, which includes the, you know, the phrases "death to America," "death to Israel," and "shame on the Jews." So this is absolutely ingrained in what they do, this kind of propaganda.
Yeah.
The other point, of course, that's highly problematic again, and this is characteristic of a lot of poor countries, is that if your economic prospects are not great and you're a teenager, let's say, you may end up joining the Houthi forces as a job, you know, as a paying job, because your options may be so limited.
In terms of the pressure that might be applied then, that you said could be one of the ways to actually force the Houthis to at least alter their ways. We had on yesterday, new US sanctions imposed on not just Iran, but Houthi-related entities. This included the targeting of vessels involved in petroleum and petrochemicals trade, which generates billions for Iran and, of course, then can help finance proxies like the Houthis. Does that have much utility, do you think?
I mean, I think it is useful. I think these measures are necessary. Of course, they are also linked. They're partly about the Houthis and what they're doing in the Red Sea, but they're also partly about Iran and the fact that Iran is an essential part of the supply chain and the economic support. Obviously, you know, it's not enough just to do that and assume that by doing that you would necessarily have an impact on the things that we've just been discussing. But I think a lot of this is to do with shining more of a light on Houthi practices. And one of the things that I really found frustrating when I was the British ambassador to Yemen was that Western interest in Yemen was very sporadic, and an assumption they would make about Yemen, I think partly because the Saudis were involved in supporting the internationally recognized government, but it tended to cast the Houthis in the role of sort of some kind of a resistance to the Saudis, when of course that was the exact reverse of the truth. The Houthis were the invaders, of Yemen, and the Saudis were actually trying to help the government of Yemen resist them.
That's Edmund Fitton-Brown, former UK ambassador to Yemen, now a senior advisor to the Counter-Extremism Project, who released that new report overnight.